afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the May 4th Administrative Committee meeting. Jenny, would you please call roll?
Vice Mayor DeRosa.
Here.
Ms. Saludo.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We have three topics for this afternoon's discussion, and the first is a DEI and ethics training update, and I believe, Homer, that's to you.
Here, let me just share my screen here. So you should just see one slide that's at this point. And really, the last time we met, I had shown you a very similar slide to this in regards to options for both ethics and diversity, equity, and inclusion training for council members and boards and commission members. Did a little bit of an update with that, and there was also a brief conversation at council meeting that you were involved with. But what we have before us is the options of a course that's put on by Stephen Francis, and it's the DEI Managing Implicit Bias and Racism Training. We had all of our employees in the city go through that, but it's a 2-hour session. I did talk with him, and he is able to tailor it, pare it down to a 1-hour session, and also tailor it to address the needs of elected officials and appointees to boards and commissions as well, to bring up some very specific examples of issues that may be pertinent to that audience. The cost for those sessions, however, is $1,250. We've got about 50 members of that group that we will be looking at. So you're probably looking at, he does them in a maximum of 25 people per session in terms of a virtual session. So it'd probably take 3 to 4 to realistically be able to get everybody, with their time schedules and things like that. So you're looking, $3,750 to about $5,000 total to provide that training. The other two are actually provided in our Cornerstone platform. The one is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion self-paced e-learning module, which it's about 50 minutes to an hour total. There's no additional cost for that because it's already on our Cornerstone platform, and we just need to give people access to it. And it consists of 9 micro-learning sessions that are all 3 to 5 minutes a piece. That you would go through, and you do that on your own. You don't have to sit down and do them all in one setting. You can do a couple a day or one a week or something like that. But the key is to just get through all 9 of them when you have the opportunity. And then the last one is actually the Ohio Ethics Law course. It's 1 hour. We've got it embedded into Cornerstone as well, but that's also one that you could also get onto the Ohio Ethics website and be able to pull it off and just do it directly from there as well. So the proposal right now is these 3 courses. We actually require all of our employees to go through these. The only difference is the Managing Implicit Bias and Racism training is 2 hours for all of our employees. So just for that one minor difference, we would recommend that the admin committee advances to council, to consider requiring all the council, board, and commission members to take this training as well. So subject to your questions.
Questions or thoughts for Homer? And maybe we can take this down a little bit so we can see each other, if that's all right. Homer, thank you. Go ahead. Sorry, Christina.
So good. I think it's great. I love it. I like that there's both the self-paced e-learning module as well as the slightly shorter in-person module. It seems very reasonable and very doable to me, while also really covering something that's really important and critical to all of our boards and commissions and to council. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I just have one question, Homer. It said that the money would be taken out of I think it's out of a training budget that we have for commissions. What is that budget? Do you happen to know? I should have looked it up on.
It's actually a couple. Jenny Delgado has it. She manages for council.
Yeah, I was thinking it's in like the $36,000 budget range or something. And the only reason I asked that is because We're also working on, and I think it's coming out of that budget as well, working on the training manual, commission, communications training manual and all that sort of thing. And also the opportunity for commissioners to continue to have training opportunities. It isn't very much money. That's why I'm asking. I don't know what that budget is. If Jenny, do you know what that's in that budget?
I do. It's 30,000.
Okay. Well, it's just something to think about as we look at our budget for next year if we're going to do this every year. Okay. I like it too. I think it's real important and I think it will be very helpful.
I agree, and I very much appreciate it. I appreciate your reaching out and see if we could get something that's tailored to the groups. My thought and recommendation would be that council would go through it first as a group, and then we could see comments or whatever on the live session, I guess I'm saying. I don't know how, from a timing perspective, we'll have to see if we can get that scheduled, but then the scheduling. Homer, do you have a recommendation? You said a maximum of 25 per group. Is it fairly interactive? I mean, is there an advantage to do smaller groups since you guys have all done it, or you or Jennifer just comments on administration?
I mean, yeah, there certainly is the interactive ability, with Steve Francis, and he's a great person to interact with. He does lead a great session. A lot of the stuff that he would be paring down in this is some of the videos that he uses in his presentation that he puts the group through. But other than that, he does engage the group. He does ask for their feedback. So yes, smaller size groups, are a little more conducive to that. But he's managed the larger groups very well. I mean, there's a lot of good interaction that goes on.
It might be, from a scheduling perspective, give folks choices, but their ability to engage with each other might be real useful as well. So it sounds like the committee, we would take this forward to council as a recommendation.
Yeah, I do. I would like to ask the balance of council's thought on having council take the training first. I actually think it'd be a great idea for us to take the training with, interspersed folks from our other boards and commissions. That's just my personal thought on that.
Okay.
I think it'd be, we interact with each other a lot, and it'd be really nice to have an opportunity to do something like this with folks that we may not interact with on a regular basis. I'm open to either side of it. It's not a deal breaker for me. My own personal preference would be, though, I would love to take that training with the members of our boards and commissions.
Okay. Yeah.
And I will tell you the feedback that we've gotten from the employees that have taken it so far. I mean, obviously you always have a few naysayers, in it, but by and large, we've received a lot of positive comments and feedback about the training. So I think this is a very good session. As a matter of fact, Dana went through it, I think, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it was a pretty good experience.
Great. Okay, then, Christina, we'll leave that off and see if that comes up during the discussion about from administration, because certainly there are pros to that as well. Absolutely.
Right. So with your approval, then I would, the memo that I submitted to you, I would just modify that for the rest of the council and advance that for probably the May 24th city council meeting, if that's what you want to do.
That would be wonderful. You're getting head nods. Thank you for your, I agree with Christina's comment. This is important to do, and I'm glad it's not a big lift to be able to provide this to all the members. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful. Our second agenda item this evening is an update. This group has been working on council communication engagement and, again, boards and commission communication engagement. And I know that our CPI team has been working on that. And I'm seeing Lindsay, I believe she'll start that discussion. We have some update items and some next steps. So Lindsay, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, members of the committee, and I wanted to start off by giving a shout out to our IT team. The last time I was with this committee, we were talking about big ideas for the 2035 visioning, and my idea was to have my own WebEx name and profile, so I wasn't Dublin CPI anymore, and within 24 hours I had my own name. So thank you to the IT staff, and that certainly speaks to the clout of this committee. So thank you. Today I am here to provide a brief update to the committee regarding the enhanced public engagement efforts for City Council. So on your screen, if Bruce can bring up that slide for me, this is just a short recap of the items that this committee discussed at the December 4th meeting. So essentially, I wanted to report out on those items. The action items that were outlined after the December 4th Administrative Committee, number one was access to Zen City and training. Bruce, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you so very much. So at that time, the members of the committee expressed a desire for council to have access to the city's Zen City platform. You asked that staff conduct interviews of each individual council member to gather suggestions and ideas about how to increase online engagement with residents. CPI could then use those ideas and suggestions along with industry expertise to create a next generation public engagement plan. And you asked CPI to explore a dedicated resource to assist council with communication efforts. Separately, in the April 12th regular city council meeting, Councilmember Fox expressed an interest in a tool Hilliard is using to engage with that city's residents, and I will be providing updates regarding each of these elements for you this afternoon. So regarding Zen City, to recap what CPI staff have shared with the committee at the December 4th meeting, this is an extremely valuable tool that we've been using for the last couple of years, and it monitors and consolidates all of the online reactions, posts, and conversations from various sources, and then uses artificial intelligence and personal insights to develop sentiment and trend insights. And then those insights help us keep a pulse on the community and any misinformation that is out there. We use this information to mitigate rumors and direct people to correct information, also to block bots and fake accounts that sometimes emerge. And we will be sharing much more about Zen City with Council at the May 17th work session. So we have a full report for Council scheduled for May 17th, and then immediately following that work session, CPI will work with the clerk's office to schedule small group executive training sessions for Council to learn how to effectively use this tool. We had hoped to provide this access and training for Council sooner, but Zen City recently performed a significant upgrade to the platform, and the company and we agreed that it would be best to wait until that upgrade was complete. That way we didn't train you on the platform and then there were changes to it and we had to do retraining. So we are just a month or two behind what we would have liked to have done in terms of Zen City. And we see the Zen City training as an important first step in the process to enhance Council's communications and online engagement efforts, because the tool provides insights into what platforms the residents are using the most and what topics they are most engaged with. So the ability to know and understand and measure the residents' online behavior is really the foundation to all of our communication and engagement efforts, and it shouldn't be any different for you guys. So then to the next generation public engagement plan. And I should have said, stop flag me down if you guys want to interject at any point here. I just wanted to prepare a few comments here for you. But if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to interrupt. Moving on to the next generation public engagement plan, next steps for that. CPI will work with the clerk of council to set up one-on-one interviews with each council member to gather suggestions and ideas on how to increase online engagement with residents. We actually have developed a set of questions to ask each member for consistency purposes, but we also will provide the flexibility for each member of council to share her or his thoughts, suggestions, or goals. And we have those questions. I will get to those in a second that we have drafted, and we'll have that to you for your review. After that, CPI staff will then report back to the committee the results of those interviews, at which point the committee may see fit to provide a recommendation to full council regarding the public engagement plan. And that brings us to the final piece of this engagement process, which is the committee's expressed desire to explore a dedicated resource to assist with council communications and public engagement. And staff believes this is something that might be included in the committee's recommendation to council as part of the public engagement plan. I hope that all makes sense up until that point. Great. And then that brings us to the questions that we drafted. Myself, CPI, we worked with Dana Homer and Jenny Delgado this afternoon just to draft some questions so that we could put it before the committee. You're more than welcome to weigh in on these at this time. We obviously want to get your weigh in on these specific questions, but we know that you're seeing these for the first time right now, and for that I apologize. But this is just sort of what we were thinking would really get to the core of what insights we all are hoping to gain from the interviews with council. So question number one, we have: what engagement tools are you aware of that the City of Dublin is using? Question number two, how do you best engage with residents to help be effective as a council member? Question three, what additional engagement processes, opportunities, and/or communication tools would best help you engage more with residents, or to do this better if desired? What specific media or social media platforms are you aware of that the city is not using that you think the city should be using? Number five, please describe how staff could assist City Council with council resident engagement. And number six, my favorite question to ask is always, what do we not ask that you think we should have? So at this point, I will pause to see if anybody has any comments. And again, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if there's anything that's jumping off the page right now that you would like to add or modify, please let me know.
I don't know if it's easy to put folks back up here. This is just so hard to see people, but Lindsay, while folks are looking at that, I would add a couple things. Like the first one, I would just provide council with the engagement tools we're already using rather than ask us. I mean, I just think would be an easy thing to do. Here's what we're doing. But the types of things that I think might be interesting to add to this engagement list would be, for example, would it be helpful, just some examples, to use the Dublin Go app to engage in different ways? For example, could we have an enhanced website? For example, could council sponsor? So I think, and I'd be happy to provide some feedback, that I think we should put some examples of things that we could do that we're not doing, because the things we're already doing, I don't think that's necessarily the question. It's more of how do we leverage what we currently have and move forward. So I think maybe some more specific examples of would this type of thing be interesting to you, I think would be helpful for the conversation with council. So again, I'd be happy to feed some more of those back, but those would be some of my initial thoughts. Christina Jane?
I do agree that there are engagement tools. I think the first question, as I looked at that, there are probably tools that you use, Lindsay, that I may not be aware of, so it would be helpful. I know that council has been asking for the improved communications for 2 or 3 years, and you have incorporated some things. So it would be nice to maybe, as Kathy said, not necessarily ask the question, but offer that, and then knowing what you have, then the questions might follow. Because such as Zen City, we did realize that you had Zen City, but we realized that we had no access to it. And those are the kinds of things you don't know how to ask until you know what you have. And so I think that would be beneficial to know what we have so that we can then either ask questions about how it's used or what are the possibilities of it and that sort of thing. I think would be helpful. That's all I can think of right now as I look down the list. I haven't seen it before, so I got to give this a little bit of thought. So I'm going to toss the ball over to Christina there.
Thanks, Jane. I'm not sure if it's something that needs to be asked in here, but maybe is about some kind of question about asking us whether we understand certain types of social media. I don't know how I want to put this, etiquette, pitfalls, those kinds of things. Because there's just some stuff you just shouldn't say. And there's some stuff that you should say in a certain way. And I think it would be helpful to understand the level of social media savvy, if you will, that each council member has. Because, I promise you, some of us are less adept at it than others. And some of us are more educated at it than others. It's just sort of, I mean, we're all different people, right? So maybe it's a question about comfort level with it. I'm not sure how to phrase that kind of thing. And then whatever stuff we come up with that we want to do, I definitely think there's got to be some training and some, hey, here's what to avoid, here's what to do. I don't know. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. No, that's great feedback. And we do have social media policy that we would definitely be willing to share with you ASAP. And then some more etiquette and things, best practices would definitely be a good thing to share.
Great.
Yeah, and speaking about that, Christina brings up a good point. It's not that city council members want to get on social media and start, blasting things. I think one of the questions would be is, what are your expectations of what are your expectations or the objectives of a public engagement plan? Because as we found the other day, there are a couple of council members that thought that we're engaging just fine, right? And then some of us that don't think we are engaging enough. And so I think that question needs to be asked about, what are the objectives of an engagement plan? For me, I like the one-on-one. I want to hear from individuals. Zen City is not enough for me. It's a mood. It's a trend, but it's not a one-on-one. So I might want to be more micro engaged where others may want to be more macro engaged. So I think if somehow we could come up with a question on, what do you anticipate a public engagement plan, its objectives would be for you in particular, then we might know just who's going to use what and who could care less about it, right? And some maybe want to train more and some may not.
Yeah, I mean, Jane, I think it is a personal kind of a choice, as to what type of engagement. And I think, I'm sorry, I'm always the risk mitigator. It's just the way my brain works. I think with that, we want to make sure that it's not just social media etiquette or social media best practices, but it's also kind of when you are meeting with folks in either a small group or a one-on-one thing, what to say, what not to say, like don't make promises, like don't, try not to represent all of council because you're one person. And just being careful about those things and then finding ways as we do meet with people individually, if there are things that rise to the occasion of, really the rest of council ought to know about this, or, because we have roundtable, but let's be really honest about roundtable. It is at the end of the night. Everybody's exhausted, especially if we have a really packed agenda. Roundtable could take us till 11 o'clock easily. And like, I don't know about you guys, my brain just, after a full day of work, a full night of council, by 11 p.m., 10 p.m., I'm like, wow, I can't even think straight right now. Like, I can't get through what you're like. I can hear it, I can feel it, but I can't process it. So there's got to be a way that we can also engage with each other about our engagements that we've had with our residents. And that's sort of me just like bringing back that feedback, the loop, right? The conversation loop.
Yeah, I think one of the things that maybe I didn't express it as well, but when I say micro and macro, like for instance, communication tool like Zen City, summarizes the trend of a very large group of people, whereas a Survey Monkey is going to get individual feedback. And so like at what level of engagement, what is the spectrum of engagement? And that, and Lindsay, you may have seen it already. I'm sure you've seen it. You're a communications major, so obviously you have. But that level of public participation that goes from informing to empowering. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the conversation I think that we also want to have, is making sure that we're not just informing and advising, but we're also, they have an opportunity to begin to direct and help create whatever the city is to be, hand in hand with staff and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I'll give this a little time and maybe add a question or two, but I think that to start with, this is a very good series of questions.
Thank you. And we'll take your feedback and refine the questions and get it back to the committee. And of course, if you guys have additional thoughts after this meeting, you can let us know before we move forward with the interviews.
Okay, Lindsay, one other quick thing before we move on. I think a couple other examples of what other communities are doing. I had mentioned that some of the things that City of Columbus has done from engagement I find very interesting. Not all of it would necessarily be applicable to us, but there's a few examples. So I think it's helpful to find a few examples and say, would this type of thing be interesting or that be interesting? So I'm happy to do some of that if you guys want to do some of that. And I wouldn't restrict it to just what councils are doing, but types of communication, because I think that also gets the juices flowing of what this could potentially be. Because as Jane said, there is a spectrum, and I think it's very helpful if we're going to have one-on-one engagements that we provide some examples and then we can get feedback and some things. So if we could do that. So maybe I would request that maybe we'll give you some feedback and then you'll send this back to us and we'll do a couple iterations. Does that make sense?
That sounds perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate you putting this together. Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. And that's a perfect segue to the next couple of slides. We have been doing, benchmarking for the last few months, and they're kind of always constantly benchmarking against other cities and other corporations, as you mentioned. And so just a quick report out on that. Most cities our size do have a communications staff that provides timely communications on behalf of City of Council, which includes things like agenda, City Council meetings, policies, council action, things like that. Many larger cities, as you know, like the City of Columbus, they do have like a dedicated communications director. Of course, they have full-time council members and are a much larger city. So as you mentioned, there is a spectrum of things. And then some public entities do utilize contractors for things like social media plans, strategies, and executions. And so, I just happened today to see the City of Columbus City Council tweeted, "May the 4th be with you," May 4th. So that's one of the things that they've done. And then a couple of other cities, there's the one in the left has a council member do a quick video talking about that experience. And then just other things about the City Hall opening after COVID restrictions and things like that. So those are some things that other communities around the country are doing. And of course, we always keep the pulse on that. And just wanted to report back to you, and Bruce, if you could go on to the next slide, that CPI is dedicated to promoting Dublin City Council as part of our citywide communications. And we do promote every City Council meeting via Facebook and Twitter. We share the agenda ahead of time and invite people to watch the live streams and to comment. We also share council actions such as economic development agreements when those are passed that help businesses thrive in Dublin. And you can see there a post we did celebrating International Women's Day, celebrating the women serving on City Council, including the mayor and vice mayor, of course. And, we do promote the various surveys that we conduct throughout the year. So, and that brings us to the topic of surveying and public engagement. And so, as I mentioned, Councilmember Fox brought up in the April 12th meeting reference to the city of Hilliard using a tool. And of course, we have great relationships with all the communications folks in Central Ohio. So I immediately reached out to David Ball, their communications director. We go way back since he used to work in Dublin here. And I asked him about the City of Hilliard's tool that they are using for Talk to Us Hilliard. And it is a vendor called Bang the Table. I know this is in the memo that I provided in your packet, but just to reiterate, that it's one of many engagement platforms available to government agencies for engagement. It is similar to My Sidewalk, which the City of Dublin used briefly in 2015. And there are many pros. There's much to like about the platform, as outlined in the memo, it is a great place that just houses all of the feedback opportunities in one place, and it looks nice. It looks polished, and it's a good way, according to Hilliard, to get some feedback without potentially some of the negative backlash that you might see on Facebook if people are in a bad mood. And like I said, it showcases that nice branding and direct messaging. So we saw that and we really liked it. And while we think that we are doing, similar engagement efforts, there's definitely an opportunity to get them all into one spot. So now some of the cons, as I was talking to David, and also outlined in the memo, is there is this barrier to entry. So it's one of those things that you have to register for, and that you have to get a new account, and you would be asking people to sign up for a new service. And whenever you're doing that, it does kind of, I think, limit the engagement that you'll get, because you're always going to have a certain people who are really engaged and might not, and then others who might not want to go that extra mile. Also, Hilliard indicated that the system does have some limitations and that participation varies a lot project by project. And thirdly, the content updates are managed by that vendor. So the communications staff doesn't have the ability to immediately take down inappropriate comments or things of that nature. So that was just another drawback. Overall, they're pleased with the platform, though. So just wanted to report out on that, as you did bring it to our attention, and we're always interested in new tools. We love exploring them and seeing either how we can use them or duplicate them, And so if you go to the next slide, Bruce, what we're excited to recommend to the committee is that we take the positives of the Talk to Us Hilliard platform and incorporate them into our Go Dublin platform. So Go Dublin, as you likely know, is designed for this easy communication between Dublin residents and the city of Dublin. It launched in March 2019 and is accessible both through the city's website and as an app for smart devices. I hope you all have it. And we have found it to be extremely successful and useful for processing service requests, improving efficiency, and sharing information. We really are just at the tip of the iceberg with Go Dublin. It has many functions that we have not yet explored, because as with any new tool or initiative, our rollout plan was sort of a phased approach. We couldn't do everything all at once, so that's why we knew we wanted to start off with the service requests. That has been very successful, as I mentioned. We processed more than 7,800 requests in the first 9 months, and those numbers have remained steady and grown throughout the rollout as we continue to phase in new uses for it. And then last year, in the early days of COVID-19, we quickly added a coronavirus button to the app, which remains there to this day as the pandemic continues. And that button takes you directly to the COVID-19 hub with quick access to a contact us feature. So those questions are routed to go directly to CPI staff via email. To date, we have received more than 150 questions through that tool. Obviously, it was fast and furious at the beginning, and they've trickled off since. But that really does allow for that two-way communication that I know many of you are looking for, because just clicking on that button and then filling out your question, and it goes to the appropriate staff members for that. So the pros of using Go Dublin, this is an existing tool that we've already invested in, and it's a brand that many residents are already familiar with and have already registered for. Another pro, the registration for Go Dublin is optional, so users can submit requests anonymously. I know I do it all the time on behalf of residents. So, so people can do that if they want to. Of course, that takes out the back and forth email, but if they wanted to do it anonymously, they can. And of course, it looks nice and can use that direct messaging. Plus, we control the content in-house and can determine what is front and center. We can change out the buttons situationally, as we did with the coronavirus, and seasonally, as we do with things like Snow Go and Leaf Go. And as you can see in my lovely, very polished draft here of what we could do going forward with Go Dublin is add a new button. And so that's kind of what we are proposing, is that we could add a new button there that would be something like Connect with Us, that would take you to this overall platform with the different surveys and things that we could have that all in one spot. So let's see. Other opportunities that we haven't really used too much is push notifications. Like any app, that is a capability. We've used it a couple of times when Rumpke was having some severe service issues. So we can send out messages that people would get on their phone if they have the app and they have the notifications turned on. And it also does provide the opportunity for geo-targeting, so we can send messages to specific areas of town, much like we can with Nextdoor when you can target certain neighborhoods, which is very nice. And that is one other thing about Go Dublin is when people are registered for it, you do know that they're residents, which is always nice. So cons, let's see, there are barriers for entry. People have to register for the account if they want that two-way communication option, the emails and the updates that I mentioned. And yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about Go Dublin. And I wanted to briefly get into our survey tools. So I couldn't tell if someone was trying
Can you
to.
go back
Yeah.
for a second? What percentage of folks are registered that use that roughly? Do you have some sense?
Of the users that are registered?
Yeah, you said we had 7,800 of requests. What percentage of them came through registered accounts versus, do we know that?
That's a great question. I would have to get those statistics regarding the anonymous requests. I know there are several thousand people registered, but I don't know the number of requests that come in anonymously. So I'll have to report back on that.
Because that could help with understanding the hurdle rate or not. And I think it's a wonderful tool. I use it. I register, so there you have it. But you know, some of the things that I think as it is, it's a Rev 1. So for instance, if you click on the recreation, it takes you to our web page landing site, same with the news. So it basically just directs you back to the web. So we're still in a web-centric versus an app-centric world. So I would put a plug in as we advance this that we really utilize some of the appness tools and refine that, because then it moves us back into really much the same of a content driven versus a two-way example. So I know the service request one is not, it's fabulous. It asks you where it is. You can send a picture. That's very app-like. But a lot of the rest of this so far, again, I fully recognize we're in phase 1 here, is very, I'll just take you to the website and then you navigate. So as we do this, I would put in it for this communication that we really think about how to take all of these things and bring it into the app type interaction moving forward. So I love it, and I think it's great to use it as the tool. I think then let's use it as the tool, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I know it's a lot harder than what I just said, but I would put a plug in for that and I appreciate it. So other
Yeah.
thoughts on this before we move ahead?
Yeah, Kathy, I think the Go Dublin app has been great. I swear to goodness, since I first got on council, I pestered and pestered and pestered poor Megan O'Callahan about this. Like for 3 years in a row, I was like, "Hey, how's that whole app thing going?" And so it was. I say that because she really worked really hard to get it on the map so that she could get it specifically for service requests, because the service request piece was so difficult to really get to and to follow through with and help residents see like, no, we actually did follow through with your request. And so it was really important for us to get it done. I love the expansion of the tool. I love the fact that it's a tool we already have. I agree with Kathy, the more that we can appetize, I totally just made that up, the better the experience will be for folks. And I think that if we can get sort of that two-way kind of communication through this particular app, since people are already using it and they're used to it, they understand the branding, I think it's going to be really, really great. So I'm all for it. I think it's a fantastic tool. And I'd love to use the tool to its fullest capacity for sure.
Yeah, and just quickly, I absolutely agree with both Kathy and Christina. It has to act like an app. It can't act like a redirect. And that's why the service requests are so popular, because it does act like just an app. And secondly, I think as we grow this, Go Dublin doesn't, it's working fine. I don't know that people use it in its full dimension that it's capable of, even as it is now. Like I got on it just now while we were talking, and There were a lot of things about it that I didn't know about. It's always been marketed as a service request kind of an app. So if it does get a refresh, it might need a new name refresh, a new look neat refresh, whatever. And then the last thing I would say is I know Mike Farrar, if you're listening, you were on last night and talking about some of the ways when we were talking about big ideas and putting together some sort of an app, a resident app. This is where it all kind of may begin to come together under something like this. And I'd love to hear input from staff as to how they think each department on an app like this could connect one-on-one with our residents. That would be the objective for me. So those are my thoughts.
So Lindsay, maybe we can ask for, I think you've got a great affirmation that yes, this would be a great way to connect. So as we bring forward, maybe we can expand on these. We'll bring it back for a future conversation, and so appreciate the work on this. So I know you have more to do, more to update us on. Thank you.
I'm almost done, I promise. So the last thing I was just going to talk about is the survey tools that we have, because I know you have an interest in that. And so I mentioned earlier about Zen City, and they do offer surveys, and we are going to be using them this year, specifically for the Dublin 2035 survey. So that'll be a nice tool that we have. That'll be a really polished professional survey that we will develop along with the planning contractor that's working on that. We also use eNews every week or every other week to do surveys. And we have done WUFU surveys, which is what we did for the DORA surveys that we've done. And they got thousands of responses. Nextdoor now has a survey tool, and we think very highly of Nextdoor in terms of communicating, because we know it goes directly to the residents, and we can target to specific neighborhoods. But they have a survey tool that we have at our disposal too. There's also something called Microsoft Forms, which is really useful that we use, and SurveyMonkey is also another great tool for surveying, and all of these can give real-time survey results, and all of them can be shared through our existing platforms and could be shared through Go Dublin. So that's really important to us, is that if we have a survey, no matter the survey tool, we can use all of our channels to kind of disseminate that to our residents. And so just for an example, because we recently shared a Kogo bike share survey on behalf of a research group out of Ohio State. They were working to do research in the suburbs of Columbus, and we shared our survey on their behalf and received 210 responses. And I just happened to get the report back from Ohio State, where Hilliard got 21 responses with their Talk to Hilliard function. So I just think it's important to point out the tools that we have that we can reach our residents through. And so at that point, I just wanted to see if you had any questions or other items of discussion for us.
Lindsay, real quick, could you go back to that last slide, please? On that survey for the Kogo, what method did you use to survey? What platform did you use?
So that survey was designed by Ohio State students that were conducting the research, and I believe it was a SurveyMonkey,
Okay.
but we shared it through eNews and social media.
Okay, so either Facebook or what? Okay.
Yep, Twitter, Facebook, and also we put some signs up at the rec center.
Okay. And that's helpful. Some of those platforms, I don't even know what WUFU is. So there's a question right there. And some of these, I don't know what they are, which means I need a little bit of learning. But the other question I had especially for me and as a ward rep, neighborhoods, like how specific can you geo-track? Like, can you just do a neighborhood by street? Probably not. Can you do
For
that?
surveying? So we can do Nextdoor by neighborhood. So we can target historic Dublin as a neighborhood. You know, most of their loose boundaries that loosely correlate to the HOAs. And Go Dublin does have the ability to target down to the street. Now that would only reach the people who have the app.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, sounds good. That's what I was wondering. Okay, good information.
Thank you, Lindsay. So we have some follow-up items. I mean, the three of us owe you some thoughts on questions and examples, and we'll do that. Maybe we could ask to have a follow-up discussion. I don't know when our next meeting is. Sorry, it's not in front of me. Or the one after. We can see what the timing is and see if we can update. But I know this is a lot of work, on top of all of your work, and sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. So
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Lindsay, can you add that slides to have Jenny slide added to our board pack so we would have it so that we can have the questions in front of us? Be great.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think Bruce, you're going to give us a quick update on. I know you're as busy working on the other component of this, which is boards and commissions with Jenny and team. So could you update us?
Yes. Thank you, Vice Mayor DeRosa. And it is a true team effort in CPI, and Lindsay has really led the charge since Sue left. So I'm just going to give her a shout out there real quick. I will share my screen because I have a couple of things to show. Okay, everyone see that okay? All right. The first thing that we want to talk about boards and commission, where we are now. So we did a short-term fix, which was created a recruitment landing page for board and commissions. We revamped the application and made it available year-round. And we started conversations with the community engagement team and the community task force to reach a larger and more diverse audience. So where we are now, what we're going to get into today is create a framework establishing a gateway to service, develop a centralized location for board and commission opportunities, establish a more detailed explanation of the interview/appointment process, and explore opportunities to talk directly to residents. So before, I know that Dana emailed this to everybody yesterday. Before I get into it, the priority is the board and commission piece, but Dana did challenge CPI to look at this with a more comprehensive landing point for all things recruitment. So you'll see that in the draft framework that it embraces this holistic approach. So that being said, the overarching theme is fuel the future of Dublin. City government is filled with opportunities for talented people who want to improve their community and make an important difference in the lives of others. And there are two ways you can go about doing that. So this is kind of a, if you will, a wireframe flow chart, but also remember that websites aren't linear, so people will have different jump-in points, but I'm just going to kind of walk you through this process. So more than a job is every day the city's 750 employees serve thousands of residents and visitors. They provide the right environment for people and businesses to grow and thrive. Join us to help shape the future of Dublin. And then that drills down to build a career, seasonal positions, internships. And all of this is built in a modular style. So if there's something else that comes up, we can do some plug and play. And then more geared towards what our presentation is today is do what you're passionate about. The city is full of passionate problem solvers who make a difference. Our volunteers provide a broad source of expertise and talent to our community. Join us and participate in our democracy. And then what we really wanted was short, choppy, punchy copy that says, yes, this is something I want to dig a little bit deeper on. So then it drills down to serve on a board or commission or other volunteer opportunities. So service on the board and commission is an excellent way for citizens to become involved in the operation of local government and to contribute to Dublin's quality of life. So if you were to click directly into that, let's do this wireframe, scroll down. So this landing page would be that sort of that interim landing page we have now. This would replace that, obviously. This would have a video on there, and we'll talk about a video series featuring council members, board and commission members, talking about why they serve and why it's important to them and important to the community. So there's some copy there. Just, I don't want to read everything because you guys can read and I don't want to insult you. So just talk briefly about it. But the big change here is board and commission descriptions here. Again, we should be able to put on an index card what something is, hand it to somebody, read it, know what it is. So that's kind of the approach, again, this modular approach. So Planning and Zoning Commission, ARB, BZA, CSAC. We can also put committees on there if we decide to add those as well. But one thing we always want to have is a current openings and apply for board and commissions at any point. So they're like, yeah, I get it. I just want to go ahead and apply, or I just want to see what's open. So that's available for our advanced people on the site. So if you click Planning and Zoning Commission, it'll give you about the commission, meeting details, current members, requirements for the commission, our residency requirements, term limits, and then current projects. That's something that people can say, hey, those are some cool things that I would like to be a part of and help further. Again, then at the end, current openings apply for board and commissions. So each board and commission would have this landing page to describe what it is and what all the requirements are to apply for it. So then the more detailed application page would be a 3 to 4 step process. Decide which board and commission you want to apply for. Again, somebody could just jump directly to this page, but we would have links there saying, hey, why don't you go back and see what board and commission you'd really be best suited for. Apply early, use the online form, wait for decision. And then what we really want to leave everybody with are the 5 things we recommend before the interview. Obviously, watch a board and commission meeting, review Dublin's community plan, read the charter, reach out to a current member, and review some facts and roles and responsibilities for each one of those boards and commissions, because each one varies. And then this current openings would be sort of like when we had ARB, that position open, just be a landing page saying current openings, apply now, but it would also have those board and description sections on that as well. So that's kind of a fast run through on that. The one thing that I really want to say is that, websites can only do so much. It's up to good people to recruit better people. So that's where council members, board commission members, anyone involved in the city, we need something to hand to people. When we, we can't get out of this soon enough where we can have meetings in person again, or you guys, council can go out to block parties or whatever. You need something to hand out. So this is the draft fuel card. Again, and it reiterates the fact that we want to fuel the future of Dublin. We want people, whether they be volunteers, whether they be employees, to come into our organization and help us further it down the road. So again, to fuel the future of Dublin. And then on the back of it is the repeat of the more than a job, or do what you're passionate about. And that's the volunteer thing. And that QR code would take you to that whole starting landing page for all of that. So that's kind of just a quick takeaway. I didn't want to go too heavy into design because I felt like that last time we approached it, I was like, hey, here's a graphic. Well, we needed the nuts and bolts before we could put the graphics in front of everything. So this is kind of leave behind. The next time you talk to someone, they ask you a question at a neighborhood association meeting, hey, you sound like you really want to do something else. Here's a card, you need to get involved. So what's next? So we need to finish out the text for the framework. We need to work on our online repository of past and current applications, regular review and engagement with residents who have expressed interest in applying, and also work on our video social experience campaign that I talked about earlier. We mentioned before back in December how we need to hear from you to sell it to other people. So that's kind of a quick, a dirty rundown of that whole thing. Again, I didn't want to read everything. So if you have any questions or comments, now would be a great time to ask.
I have a question on the apply for boards and commissions page. Yes. Where you click on that button. The 5 things we recommend. So they can I think some links on this 1 through 5 here, particularly for read the city charter, review Dublin's community plan. Links to those would be super helpful for folks because they may not necessarily know how to get to them.
No, I thank you for bringing that up. I should have said I did not make links to anything in this. Everything will be linked out to the 10th degree. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, for sure. And then step 4 is hard, right? Wait for a decision. It's kind of, and I don't know if it's something that we want to, put in an email that would, I guess, ultimately go to Jenny, but just so that if they apply in like, I don't know, February or March, and it gets to be like October and they haven't heard anything, like they could email somebody and just say, hey, I just want to make sure you still have my application. Something like that. From a recruitment perspective, it doesn't really matter whether you're recruiting for a full-time position, a seasonal position, a volunteer type position, that ability to engage throughout the process, even if it's a long process, is really,
Okay.
really critical to keeping folks kind of on the hook, if you will.
Right. Okay. I will jot that down.
Yeah, but I really love the flow of this,
Okay.
and I love the little fuel cards you guys put together. I think having those sort of, I don't know, sometimes they call them elevator cards, right, are really
Right.
important. It's very tangible. And it's one of those things where someone gets home, they take the thing out of their pocket or out of their purse, and they're like, oh yeah. And they pick it up and they look at it and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna go check this out. I know it seems crazy. People are like, oh, business cards are a thing of the past. But I promise you, this kind of stuff is not a thing of the past. Like, I know we're all digital in this world, but people still love that tangible thing that they can look, touch, feel, and remind them of the conversation that they had with somebody. So I love it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right. I also think that I like the flow down. I think that and I understand you still have a lot to do on design and making it eye candy worth, right? All of that.
Absolutely.
I do think that's important. I definitely think that there should be some video conversations either by commission members of a commission or a little quick, like video cameos of them sitting at a commission meeting or someone showing a development application up on a slide so that they get a quick, they don't have to watch the whole meeting because they're boring as you can imagine. But it would be nice to be able to watch a quick clip
Yes.
of them asking a question to an applicant or an applicant showing their presentation or a conversation among the commission members who are saying, well, I believe code said this, or, that sort of things, then kind of get a sense of what that job looks like, because most people don't go to those. So I think that kind of video eye candy is really good and very informative. I also think that when you say reach out to a commission member, and you're probably going to do this anyway, but make sure that their emails are right there next to their names and that sort of
Yes.
thing. Or a
Yes.
council member even, whether that's, either a current member or council member, either one. I think that's important. And then I have, as we've worked, and I know Jenny Delgado has this as well, information on roles and responsibilities. We're working on kind of developing that. And so that should be able to give you some really good foundational stuff to stick in that. And if Jenny doesn't have it all, I know that the committee does. So make sure that you incorporate,
Yes,
the work.
absolutely.
And that community, I guess, the community plan, if you have the link, that's the most updated and actually, which is another opportunity. Maybe not. Well, I don't know if the community plan, I don't know if Jenny Roush could tell. I haven't looked at the community plan on digital. Is that a sort of a color like the book? What's the community plan look like digitally now? Is it the full page kind of a full color community plan? I haven't seen it.
I
Yeah.
think, oh, go ahead, sorry.
So the most recent version is electronic only and it's on the website. So it's not as coded, but it's a little more user friendly because you can search words. And so it's easier to, in my perspective, it's easier to navigate.
Does it have that same sort of, is it full color like the book was, where you had the pictures and the wording? Is it laid out like that? It is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, you should check it out, Jane. It's actually really, I refer back to it all the time.
I have the old book.
I know I use this one because I can't, I don't have I have all my old stuff in my book and everything, but it's all in the basement in a bin and I
Yeah.
just can't drag it out. So I'm like, oh, forget it. It's actually really nice.
I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna
Yeah.
get updated. Okay. So right now, those are my thoughts on that so far, but I think you're moving in the right direction. I think there's a lot of refinement still to be done and making it really, I guess I would like to hear what people think about having the application next to the jobs. I had a kind of a wondered about that, whether that was the right way to do it or they should be separate. I'd like to hear what people think.
Hey, Jane, to that end, and first of all, Bruce, Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. We're moving a huge step forward. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
What I was wondering, and what we hear so much in applications is, I really don't know why I picked P&Z or ARB or this. I just want to serve. I want to volunteer. So I wonder if and I don't know about I won't want to comment on the jobs for a minute because I think that could absolutely, that's all part of the sauce. But just some ability to understand all the different ways you can serve, and you don't have to go down that bunny path if you don't want to your point, the web allows you, but just some scope of what it is to serve here. We have volunteer opportunities, we have boards, this is what boards do, we have council, this is what council does, work, I'm not sure. I mean, we get the question or we get the comment all the time, why'd you raise your hand? I just want to give back. I just want to serve. They're not really sure. They'll apply to 5 things. So I think maybe some precursor work on our volunteer opportunities and what your options are. I say precursor, when you first get there. And again, if you just want to go to boards and commissions because you absolutely know you wanted to serve on planning and zoning, but I do think that because it's such a rich thing, and I see Christine has leaned forward, so I know she might have some comments, but that was worth exploring. I mean, it might be overkill, but I would explore that because I really think that would be an important piece to address right up front.
Right.
Because it is separate and distinct.
Let me, if I could pull this just up again. And again, that's where we're talking about this, do what you're passionate about. And that's that whole track for all the volunteer stuff. So it would list out, like Christine's department would be here. Absolutely. And she helped write this section here. So I definitely see what you're saying.
Call it other volunteer. I would call it, do you know what I mean? These are all, as if it is a lesser thing or a different, you know what I'm saying?
I do.
They're all equal kind of tracks that
Okay.
I may want to just volunteer on a Saturday, or
Okay.
or I may want to do the board and commission. And all I'm saying is let's just help educate them a little bit. I'm not trying to make this harder than it is. I think jobs fit here actually. I personally do. But I think just helping people understand the scope of what my choices are, and they may not choose to go down there, but
Okay.
right up front, maybe they don't even want to be in a board and commission, but that's all they see there. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I absolutely get it. And I can work with Christine on that.
Well, I think if I could, I think that part of what you're alluding to is maybe taking that volunteer box, which is kind of down, and moving it up so you have employment, volunteers, and then governance, or something that's and then listing. I think we should, and Bruce alluded to this as a potential build out, is the advisory committees and the task forces and all those other things that kind of fall under that column of governance or boards and commissions. But if you think about this, and the reason I challenged the staff the way I did, because I get people who email me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job at the city of Dublin, but oh, by the way, I live in the city of Dublin. Is there some other things I can do?" Well, then but if we could say, "Hey, go to this," and I tend to be a website guy more than an app guy, so I think that way, and I'm sorry I'm behind, but I also think that's a reflection of our society. Many will rely on websites and others like apps, and we're kind of in that transitional whatever these days about people using both. But I think that by getting everyone in one spot, well, maybe I can't get a job with the city, or I thought I did, but there's nothing I really want, but I can do that. And we get a number of our own residents who apply for jobs in the city, or at least try to explore that. So I think it just takes everybody to all the different stuff. So
much better said than what I was saying, but I think that will help. I think putting all that up as sort of equal parts would be helpful. And I know Christine would like to. Oh, okay. No. All right. So anyway, Bruce, so we're just refining on some good work.
Dana is very shocked that I said, no, I don't want to say anything. I'm
on,
reacting to
Mark,
him. Yeah, I think to Jane's point about work versus volunteer, it is very common on government websites that you see them both on the same page. And I think we're very distinctive about the firewall between the two. You don't volunteer as a path promised path to employment. It's the experience we need to focus on the most. And our philosophy is if the experience is well worth it and gains a reputation, you will not have to recruit, quite frankly. And so this is a good step one, but it's really about the people who are serving getting an experience that nobody else can get. And that is your strongest recruitment tool. So I will get with Lindsay and Bruce about sort of the pathways that I see and the language that I think will be smooth. It's a great start.
Wonderful. Yeah, it is. And so there's just so much to do here that step forwards are going to be. So Bruce, thank you very much. And we'll, move the pieces around and even as you know, right, it'll have a
Absolutely.
shelf life of one day, right, until it gets improved again. But I think are you looking for some other feedback from us, or what are you asking the group to do?
Just that to say yes, we're on the right track now. We still need to build out each one of those areas. Like we don't have the text for every board and commission. We don't have the do's and don'ts things. So we really need to keep refining this. So I guess it's based on what your direction is, that if you say, hey, keep trucking along and then give us a feedback update, I guess it's really up to you what you want to see next.
Well, perhaps we'll do that if that makes sense, as you add some more things and do a little show and tell with us maybe before the pages go live or something. That would be, and again, don't wait on us necessarily. I mean,
Oh, no.
don't wait on our chance to have a meeting, but as you can tell, we're not going to be shy in giving you feedback, but this is such an important thing. And I know, Christina's been working on that longer than Jane and I, but Jane and I have been working on it since we've been here too. So such a step forward, and I appreciate it. And it's so nice to connect the different volunteer pieces. So we'll look for an update and some feedback. How's that?
Sounds great.
Cool. Anything else, Bruce?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Great. So we have one more item, the Dublin 2035. Anything else on the communication, Christina or Jane, before we move ahead? Okay, and I see Tammy here, not Jenny today, so I guess Tammy's gonna run with this. So Tammy, thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to explain, I gave Jenny the evening off, so I am happy to be here with you tonight. We appreciate our first interaction with the committee. We had a great experience. We've highlighted the quality of life topic for this group, which is one of my favorite topics because it's so encompassing. So we have actually went through the first round meetings with each committee, where this is now noting our second round of discussions with this group. So first and foremost, we would just want to say thank you. We really got great participation, and we can't do this without great participation. So everyone put their best foot forward. We received well over, Logan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know it's close to 40 comments amongst all of the groups. So we had no idea we were going to be that fortunate to get that many ideas. So we want to thank the group and just kind of lead into this discussion and what we are hoping to achieve tonight. I won't speak on behalf of Jamie or Logan, but I just wanted to say we wanted to briefly talk about the ideas. I don't know if that feedback's from me or somebody else, but sorry, I hope that's not me. I'll step away from my computer a little bit. I have a tendency to lean forward when I want to express myself. So tonight we want to basically talk about the comments that we heard from the committee and make sure that we heard your suggestions correctly. It's very important that we not misinterpret someone's point of view. I know that some committee members were kind enough to send us illustrations of their ideas, which were all a visual group of people. That's extremely helpful, and we'll continue to gather those. But we also want to start to talk about one, are we capturing the comments correctly? And two, are you starting to see some themes that you think may rise to the top, if you will, or things that you want to explore in more depth? We will be leading into presentations from experts. We were starting to research candidates for that. And so having this discussion will help us make those determinations. So that's the second part. Third, we wanted to talk about the discussion points that Jenny had proposed to the group, a very calculated format for everyone to respond to. And as usual, Jamie and Logan will help us facilitate the discussion. So if you hear nothing of what I've said, I just wanted to say thank you for your participation and being a team player and coming with your big ideas. So with that, I will hand it over to Jamie and Logan.
Thanks, Tammy. And I think Kathy and Jane could probably do this themselves after last night, fully engaged in that work. I would like to thank you as well. This is really special work. I mean, every one of these meetings reminds me that, you know, not every community out there your size is having these kinds of conversations. And it's really special, you know, and I hope it's not lost on any of you or your constituents about, you know, the ability to do that. And not just to have conversations, but have the confidence that you can actually do this work. So I think that's really special in that regard. So there are a couple of resource documents tonight that we have available to us. One is this theme relationship matrix that has the 39 big ideas to date. And we will probably be pulling that up soon, but I think that'd be a good document to have handy. And then there's also a document, a supportive document that actually has some more detail to it, that has some narrative around each one of these. Because one of the challenges that we have, I know you can appreciate this, and we've discussed it, is that, you know, it's hard to take your big ideas that are complex and put them in just to a headline and appreciate what's there. But it's also hard to carry a paragraph in a table and, you know, get a sense of what's going on. So we've got actually two documents that are supporting each other in that relationship. There are three things we'd like to do tonight with all of you, and that's staff too, is to look at what you've created so far. The 14, and by the way, you created more than any other group, if anybody's competitive in this effort, but 14. And we'd like you to take a look at those and see if there aren't some that really should be elevated, you know, not really taking anything away yet, you know, but are there some of your lists that you just think are sufficiently impactful? They're the really expansive, transformative ideas that really ought to come to the top. So what could be elevated? The second, you know, part of that is when we talk about what should be elevated, I think we ought to be keenly tuned into why. You know, what do we think the outcomes or the benefits of elevating something over another should be? So be thinking about the motivation for doing this. And then the third thing that we'll come to at the end is trying to get some sense of you that if the ideas that we begin to see that maybe elevate, how would it make the community different in 2035? What kind of Dublin would we have? You know, what are the attributes that you're going to help create by making this kind of investment and commitment in a big idea? Now, so it's elevate, why, and what kind of place do we create? Those are the three things, not all at one time, but that's the order. I would tell you, and it's probably obvious to some of you, and it was pointed out to us last night, that you know, some of these ideas don't maybe sing or tell a great story on their own. They might be important, but if you bundled them up with another item or another 4 items, you could really, really create something transformative, a big idea. So it's perfectly okay if you want to elevate an idea and you want to bring some other ideas with it into the mix. But there may be some that you just want on their own you think are big enough. So the chart that you see here, you know, tries to indicate, you know, that in case you're wondering about this coding business. So if you see in the quality of life column, you generated ideas, and those are your 14. If there's a really strong red dot, we thought that those really were at the core of quality of life. But we kept them up there, but we identified, if you look at QL2, the smart campus, it was our judgment that maybe that's an idea that belongs in the economic as an idea for them. It doesn't mean it has to be that way. It doesn't mean they should be disconnected, but that's the way that we analyzed it. And then if you look at those circles with the arrows on them, that indicates that other committees actually had a very, very similar, if not the same idea. So the regional partnership for community support services, that actually came up in 3 different groups. So that's what the coding is there, if it helps you to understand where this is. At some point, it won't really matter so much about where it gets categorized, as long as it gets a good plan for getting it done. So is there any questions before we get started on the first question about what should be elevated or could be elevated? Any questions? Okay. So let's start with, anybody have thoughts about what might be elevated up out of the 14? And Christina, since you weren't with us, maybe if you were interested, maybe you could go first.
And Jamie, could we take this down? I think we have it in board pack so we can see each other if that would work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Logan.
Okay. I think I don't know. I mean, I think there's some things in here that definitely could be grouped together. As I was going through the list, I was like, oh, there's like things that are similar or have I don't know, notes that run through them. And I think the first one, engaging a civic center for engaging and celebrating diversity. The third one, which is really more EDI related, but they're akin to each other. I think could potentially be grouped together. I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure what number 11 means. The multilingual community thing.
Yeah.
I think housing, I know that was lightly circled here and more heavily circled. You guys think it should go to over land use. As you can see, every group identified it as something that's important to us. So I do think that I don't really care which group it goes in, but it's definitely something that we, need to address. Safest and most welcoming city through procedural just practices. I am not entirely sure what that one means. But I'd like to tease that one out a little bit more.
Okay. So I don't know how quickly you can do this, Logan, but there's a little bit of narrative in the attached, the other document, if that helps.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm still not 100% clear on it. And
well, that's fair.
Yeah, I think the smart campus is really super interesting, but I kind of agree with you. That one might be something that maybe makes more sense in economics. And I apologize, I was not at the finance committee meeting. I was not able to make that. Those are the ones that jump out at me as I read through this list.
Great. Homer, were you going to say? I thought you were going to speak.
No, you actually touched on it. I was going to refer to the other document.
Okay.
Where they got the bullet points under each one to add some more clarity to it.
Yeah, I read through it.
Right. So in terms of the one that you mentioned, the Dublin, a robustly multilingual community, Logan, I don't know if Christina said she had read through that. It didn't really help. So should we, just in terms of deciding, we need to be able to understand what we're dealing with here. So is there somebody maybe who offered this or maybe has an interpretation on this one that we might give a little bit more meat to that?
So I'll tell you why it was kind of, I'm sorry, which one are we looking at again?
I was number 11.
11. I'm sorry. I was really just looking at number 8. That's what I had pulled up, but I got 11 right here. And I don't know if this is more about, making sure that we have ways for our website to be more multilingual. I know we talked about the potential for adding different languages on signage. I'm not sure. I find that a little bit confusing. I'm just not sure what that would look like. And like which languages would we pick? And I and the reason I say that is because in the work that I've done on the friendship committee in the past, part of what we found is if we try to reach out to one group versus another group, there can be a little bit of push pull there. Like, well, how come you? So, for example, when we were looking at different areas in India to have a friendship city relationship with, it became apparent to us really, really quickly that depending on the area of India that it was in, we were getting a lot of different responses. And then it was, well, if you pick that area, then how come you didn't pick mine? If you pick that language, why didn't you pick? So that's why it's a bit confusing to me. And that's my own perspective, just from my own experience. And like, I might be totally spouting nonsense. Happened maybe once or twice in my life.
Yeah. I can't comment on that. So someone generated this. I mean, I don't think Logan just came up with this on his own. So if, I think this had something that, if I recall some of the conversation about, wanting to make sure consistent with your diversity, interest and values, that you live it some way, and the language, is clearly part of that. But I don't have a lot more on that. Is there somebody in the meeting here who advanced this particular idea?
I remember talking about it. And maybe this is one that goes with the other two that I just identified as being part of our EDI and part of our diversity efforts.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
if
feel
I
like
could,
if that's the case, it goes pretty nicely together.
no, that's exactly right, Christina. That's exactly where that came from. I do remember it coming directly out of the conversation about diversity and inclusion. I don't remember specifics because I remember thinking to myself, does that mean we provide services for people who may have
Right.
a primary language other than English? So I'm not quite sure if we got that far, but I wasn't the person that gave the example, but I do remember that discussion pretty well.
Yeah, because it could mean things like ensuring that we have translation services for mayor's court. And I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you could do that. And so I wonder if this one goes sort of with the other two. I might group it together just because of that.
Okay.
It needs context is all I'm saying.
Sure.
And it might derive that context from the other two that are related to EDI.
Right. All right. Any other comments on this discussion, or other thoughts on what might be elevated here? Kathy, you had a pretty good one last night about.
Kristen, as I looked through the list, I felt the same way, that I think by themselves they're interesting, but when you begin to group them and move the pieces around, the stories you could begin to tell, I think, really are quite interesting. So to me, like 1, 2, and 5 on here could be absolutely the same thing. So we have a center of engagement, which could be a center of learning, which could be also a leadership institution. We don't have to call it a civic center in past lives. It could be a language institute. I mean, all at the same time. So one of the things that I think that we're learning is that buildings are multi-use, right? And have different opportunities. And how do we really think about what we need and how to do it? So I think we could have fun if we started to put a few of these together. And if we added on infrastructure number 10 here, a living learning lab for technologies. I mean, so you could connect a lot of these, or maybe not, but the good ideas, I think, start to come when we elevate some of the pieces. So for me, those are particularly interesting. I don't know if it's pedestrian only city, but pedestrian or people first city, that concept which we've talked a lot about as a group. And then again, if you start to talk about people or pedestrian first, then you bring the mobility and the greenways together. So we may have started these as land use, quality of life. I think very quickly from a big idea perspective, I think they start to morph and change. That was my perspective, and they're richer stories.
Right.
But for me, having a center that really is lifelong learning and vibrancy is an important thing, whatever that could look like on this
Right.
list.
Thank you. Jane, did you have?
Yeah,
something?
so I'm going to tag on to Kathy there, because I was thinking of this cultural civic center, and if it's a big idea and you want to do something that really would impact the city, I start to think about, I won't talk about the what's, but the whys. So when we talked about quality of life and why, and it's all human centered, it's about the people. What could a building do for this community that we're not doing now? There's no place to go to watch a wonderful concert, or hear a concert, or watch a performance, or listen to a great speaker, or to learn about new technologies. Could that same building create a center for esports? Like Kathy said, a building can be very flexible, can do a lot of things. Why do you want to do that? Because you want to create an experience, and we've talked about this: social interaction, digital experiences, technology impacts that maybe people haven't experienced before, whether that creates a visual, emotional response through some great performances that are digital. There is, as I sent one aspiration, I think it was, I cannot remember the name of the website, where the artist was up against a digital wall, and as she danced, the wall changes in artistic visual impression. Her performance created a digital interaction with this canvas behind her that was a digital canvas. A building like that would allow you to do all of those things would then nurture and start to hit on all of those points that we talked about. I think, Jamie, you asked us to give us 3 words last night of what the community should look like. And I think that we did that in that very first session, where we talked about they had to meet these criteria. So I think elevating that building, that sort of a building, whatever it does to incorporate the aspects of that quality of life that we're looking for, would be really cool, and very transformative, I think. I personally like pursuing, as we talked last night about the bicycle loops, everybody got really excited about that. The pedestrian greenway in some way, shape, or form that visually impressed anyone that came through Dublin that we are a pedestrian oriented city. And then we would grow from there and maybe create more connections in the neighborhoods, more mini cities, whether that's West Innovation District, whether that's Metro Blazer area or DCAP area. But if you could start out with a spine of a greenway that spoke loudly that we were a pedestrian and bicycle oriented city, and that we were growing from there, I think that would be the 2 things I would elevate in this list.
Right. And Jane, there's, excuse me, clearly are a number of those that are related that could be combined together to make, richer. I see at least 3 of these that are the greenways and the bicycles. Let me ask you about the pedestrian only district in the city. Like, this was talking about creating a place, it sounded like a pedestrian mall, like it's a district, which is not the same thing as what you were just saying. You're talking about there's this orientation mentality about the city that is pedestrian first. So and I don't know where this district, if we caught it correctly or not, but is it really about a pedestrian oriented city, or is it about a district, or is it both? Anybody?
Jane, I think I actually contributed the idea of a pedestrian only area of the city, but I think what Jane's focusing on is slightly different. I think and Jane, of course, please feel free to explain, but I think what she's saying is it would be a tangible and noticeable thing if you were experiencing Dublin for the first time, if you saw bikers, you saw signage, orienting people to where they need to go, that we're supporting the bike community. So I think that's a slightly different thing.
Right.
So
It sounds different, but I just want to I don't want to understand.
I agree. I mean, closing down Longshore, like we did for the one summer, made that a pedestrian only area, and everybody thought that was cool. There are other areas you can do. But now the city is built, so I don't know how practical it is. But I think it's in Barcelona. They took they took 3 blocks wide and made that their greenway. Anything among that, everything is pedestrian oriented. We couldn't do that, but we could maybe do that over a stretch of an area where as you drove your car, you saw people walking, biking, and the greenway was flanked by beautiful trees and artwork and maybe an archway, and you could tell this was the large greenway that connected the city from point A to point B. And it spoke to you that this is an area you can get out and walk, bike, and everybody's outside doing it.
Right. Some of you probably seen the open streets concept that, started in Brazil and Curitiba, where they take their main boulevards and almost every Sunday they close it off and they give the street to the people. And it's designed in a way that it's meant to be given. It's not taking a typical street that's only designed for, cars. It is meant to be a convertible street. So it can do both, but they close it off. They give it over to the people. And, you can have yoga. LA does one where it's 11 miles of streets that are closed off. And it's called open streets or ciclovia. But you can have yoga in the streets. You can ride a bike. But it's a major community sort of event and come together. And it also invites, tourists that come and visit your city and go on the ice cream route or whatever they want to go on that was identified. But anyway, there are other ways to get the pedestrian only district that doesn't have to be that way, like for, 365 days of the year.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Are there anybody else, Homer, in terms of things that like elevating? Is there anything different that's you see here that we really ought to give strong consideration of elevating it?
Well, I'm a fan of the Super Greenway, the QL12 myself. I know that's been talked about quite a bit. And I think there's plenty of opportunities to really focus on that one in terms of interconnectivity throughout the city. So that's one that I would definitely throw up, in terms of elevating, looking into the future.
Great, thanks, Homer. Anybody else?
And then I guess I'll just reiterate the one I said again last night, because I thought it was really more of an infrastructure thing anyway. But the QL9, the looking at the electric vehicles and being able to support that. Yeah, it speaks to quality of life and it speaks to infrastructure both. And knowing where our automotive industry is heading and our country is heading in terms of moving toward electric vehicles, I think that's just something that we need to make sure that we can stay out in front of.
Well, that sounds right. Yeah, Jane. Yeah.
Just quickly, and we haven't talked about this, but we talk about walking and we talk about biking. Now we have scooters, and Dana wasn't in the neighborhood this morning when I took my little golf cart across the street to Carr Place. Don't tell Chief. Oh, he's on. Gosh, too late now. But, this, the Greenway and that sort of thing, and I love the idea that we would go to electric because we're, the autonomous vehicle and we're trying to be sustainable, but maybe opening up our minds to bringing in some actual fun, personal electric vehicles that would be utilized for just within the community kind of stuff. Because I thought to myself, I wish I could just, and I can drive the golf cart if I was street ready, but there's going to be more than golf carts in the future. I guarantee you they're going to go by the wayside and something's going to look like a little bubble and people are going to drive around in them. And we ought to make sure that we're allowing for all of that as we open up these streets and greenways to all kinds of motorized anything, maybe even water powered, who knows?
Jane, the idea is interesting, about how you might make an arrangement, but it's not the same thing, but maybe there's something relevant here that AEP has made a grant to Columbus State to provide students who have transportation as a barrier, like getting to classes. And so, there's a large number of that fleet that are going to be, branded and put out there, and infrastructure is going to be built to accommodate that kind of vehicle on campus and near campus. But when you said your comment there, made me think that there are ways you could actually have programs that you could put a fleet of cars out, your own, like the city's cars, right? Or with partnership with corporations that actually, as a way to demonstrate what you're doing or what's important, that you actually find corporate partnerships or something to do something like that. Or maybe some of the Columbus State students who get these cars, maybe they're coming to your campus for it.
Jimmy, as we think about bringing in experts to help us noodle on some of these big ideas, mobility and transportation has come up so much, there are people that this is what they think about all day long, not in terms of just autonomous vehicles. I'm not talking about that, but just sort of some of these futures. It seems like it would be one of the things we ought to be sure we have. And maybe it's really futuristic, but 2035 is a long way away.
Right. And one of the things, yeah, some of you know that we're working on identifying like some speakers around the June workshop for council and really targeting futurists. And some members of the group here have heard some of these speakers. A couple of them that I'm familiar with, they really talk about the rapid pace of change. And so to Kathy's point, for them, like 2035 is a really long time when things are happening just extraordinarily quick, right here. They might, encourage you to think about 2025, but it's happening fast, to your point, Kathy, and that'll be really clear. Anybody else, in terms of ideas about things that you see or you want to elevate? I think if Matt were to speak up, I know which one he would pick. Yes. Yeah. Dana?
Yeah, hey, just real quick, to what extent is sustainability discussion under infrastructure really getting legs relative to quality of life? It seems to me like if we're not saying we want to be a zero waste community or a energy efficient community and kind of, and be a big leader in sustainability, and that's all things from waste reduction to energy consumption and diversion and all those kinds of things. Is that all being discussed under infrastructure only, or is that, I can see where that bleeds over into a lot of different areas?
Yeah. I think a lot of these bleed, back and forth, Dana. So it just happens to be an infrastructure, but maybe some of the members of this group could talk about how they feel about it. But it is, you can see that, we think that 3 of the 4 groups have to be involved with it, and 2 of the groups, actually generated this, this, if we're looking at IN 9, that there wasn't just one group that was there.
And I guess my point is, we're a community that talks so much about all these things of green and preservation and, all that sort of stuff, that zero waste or waste minimization and energy burn and all that stuff, carbon footprints need to be, and I know we have a sustainability advisory committee, we have a sustainability plan, but I keep poking JM and Nick about that ain't bold enough. That ain't bold enough. We got to get bold here. What are we doing about, I want to be a zero waste organization, period.
Yeah.
Say it and do it.
Fully electric fleet in 5 years, is that a realistic?
Yeah, I mean, we've converted so much already to compressed natural gas. We can't forget that. Compressed natural gas is a feeder to hydrogen fuel cell, which is also a feeder with electric. We leaned in on compressed natural gas because we really thought that the corridor out here with Honda would go more hydrogen fuel cell, because Honda had a hydrogen fuel cell corridor running between LA and Las Vegas, and we were trying to attract that here. And so, but now things are going sort of a combination of that towards electric, and all that stuff happens kind of together. You'll see a lot of different multi modes of fuel consumption being used. So we're sitting nicely in that. Right out here in Union County, you've got these pretty significant solar fields now being proposed. Can we tap into that? IGS Energy is one of the largest, very large solar deployer in the nation. The problem is they won't deploy in Ohio because our own laws are forbidding of it. So so anyway, sorry, I won't get on my soapbox, but we should be a big leader in that area.
Yeah. So I guess, Dana, part of what I'm picking up from your comment is that given how you feel and what you understand the aspirations are, maybe we don't have an idea in here that really captures the imagination. It doesn't bundle it up enough.
I think pieces and parts of it are all through here. It's can you bundle all these pieces and parts together and make a really bold statement about it, and not just for the sake of making a bold statement, but actioning on it and being that leader, that I think we can be. So anyway, just a thought.
Good. Any other reactions to Dana's thoughts there, Tammy?
Yeah, I mean, if I could add, I always think about this when I'm Matt, and I don't talk about soccer fields, I talk about housing. With all due respect, Matt, you're way smarter than me, but I always think that in housing, wouldn't it be great if we had a standard that says either X percentage of your materials have to be recyclable materials, your practices are, you have to, any type of materials that are left over, you have to recycle. We don't have any of those, just very simple, tangible things that we could put in place. And wouldn't it be cool to say, I live in a community where 50% of our building materials are recycled materials, or all the houses have to have rain barrels, or maybe we do have solar powered something, light, street lights, whatever. There's so many little small things that we could do to make a big impact. And those are visual impacts that people will see and understand. And then we're basically leading by example. So if you ever need someone to talk about housing, you can bring me back.
No, but I think, to what I heard Dana saying and what you're saying, Tammy, is that there is you can do this at a superficial level, or you can do it at just a completely ingrained in everything every decision you make, there's a check off or a decision about, is this a sustainability opportunity or not? And it could be very specific in that regard.
And then you start to think about, okay, so what happens to a gas station when you don't need gas anymore, right? And the recharging station takes 20 minutes. What's going to happen in those 20 minutes while you're at the, you start to think about what infrastructure looks like if you make these changes. It impacts a lot. Are you pulling that thread through here and begin to have a conversation of, what happens in those spaces that once upon a time were dedicated to something that was not sustainable. And I just use that as one example, but I think it's a very rich idea.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting sort of exercise, Kathy, if you took that further and you talk about all the mobility parts of your big ideas, right? You take those into account, you take into account the changes in technology. to actually look at your current land uses and see, what is likely to change, what's going to be different. I mean, are you going to need all the surface parking lot that you currently have now, given the walkability and the other mobility choices that you're talking about? And so that could be an interesting recommendation for the community. There's some of the things that you guys are talking about that probably don't end up in the 2035, but they end up like key questions for the community plan. That could be a land use analysis piece about where's the potential for change given what 2035 might have learned or suggest. All right, so it feels like,
Hey, Jamie.
we should be bundling up something here as we go to the next step on here that's really about defining this larger sustainability environmental piece. Brandon, you had your hand there, but I just missed you.
Oh, that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I was just going to say, I really like this discussion and this line of thinking. And I think between, Dana's comments, Tammy's comments, like to me, that's where a big idea is really bubbling up. And Jamie, you hit it on the head. And it's kind of how we talked about utilizing guiding principles as well. But I think there's a twist in this. When you talk sustainability and you make that one of these key components that we check all these things against, I think that gets to be a really big idea. And the side that I wanted to talk about real briefly was, and I don't think we have it in the list here, but it is a spinoff from the guiding principles of the people first idea. And Kathy's mentioned it a number of times as well. And when we start thinking about quality of life should be that we as a government to provide services and as a service provider, everything we should do, we should think of our customer first, and not think of a policy first. We should always ask, what is that customer thinking? And it goes around to people-centered design or human-centered design and all of those kind of things. And I wonder if there's not a big idea around that we say, we feel strong enough in the conviction that we're serving our citizens that every decision we make, we're going to go through an exercise that places, whether it's sustainability, that was another great example, or this customer or this person first. So when we go make a decision, playing out how does that affect all the personas involved? How does that affect, the people that are actually servicing and doing design? So I don't really know how to encapsulate that, and I don't know if maybe that is just better as a guiding principle. But to me, the big idea would be enforcing and using that, and really like making sure we're asking those questions moving forward like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Brandon, it sounds like some sort of new model for decision making. I'm like, you guys obviously have great decision-making models right now, but you're suggesting that maybe it's a big idea that Dublin, think a little bit differently about what's really important in these the decision-making process. And I don't know what that is right now either, but people-centered, human-centered, it's an interesting lens.
I think when we first had that very first meeting, Brandon, you were, I don't know if you were in that one or not, but where we talked, I think you were, talked about everything being human-centered and people-centered. And I think it would be wise to bring those original objectives or criteria back as sort of like to beta test your ideas and see where, if it meets and matches some of those qualities and conditions that we felt were the authentic part of creating change in Dublin. If there was any change, you can't lose the authenticity or the people-centered mission of making sure that whatever you do is something that nurtures and creates a better community for the common good. So I like I really like that you brought that back up, because I think that we can always go off and think of big ideas, but it may not end up, the consequence may not be as good as it could have been if we'd followed the objectives of being, common good centered.
I think that, Jane, to your comments there, we have in the document that supports the color coded matrix, we tried to capture some of the intent. But I think it's going to be really, really fundamental as we work through these ideas with you, is to be really clear about why you would do it. The sustainability piece, like what is it you're trying to do? Is it about saving money? Is it about saving the environment? It is about like your image and identity. You know, like what is it that's motivating you to do that? So we want to really get at that to help you make the case or understand why you'd want to do some of these things. And Jane, you were mentioning the comments earlier. I know there's a lot of things that we've called different types of information. I think there was something called principles that were kind of your statements of intent about why you were doing certain things. And last night we did talk about, like, you know, I ask everyone, and I'm asking you now to the extent you're willing to play along, is that if we were to carry forward the things that have been thrown out here tonight, whether it's about sustainability, or about mobility or greenways or other aspects of big ideas, like what would Dublin be like if you were successful in pulling these things off? Like, what would it be? And if there are 3 words, like if they're just 3 attributes that Dublin would be like, you know, X, Y, and Z, if you could do that for us, because I think to me this gets to part of like why you would do it, because we're trying to create a community that is like this. So we're going to go back and look, you know, as Jane had suggested, go back and look at that work. But I think those are items that you may have started back in November. And many of you have, you know, watched World City videos, you've researched, you've discussed. I don't know if anything has changed for you or if it's still really solid. But are there 3 words, you know, you can put them in the chat box, you can throw your hand up here, but that would describe the Dublin that we would have if we were able to realize, you know, these big ideas that are on your mind tonight to be elevated? Now, Kathy told us last night that she was going to spend some more time and be thoughtful, and we know she will, so I appreciate that. So I'm not looking for Kathy to give me 3 tonight. But are there others?
Jamie, I'll just bring up a thought that I had, in that, you know, I think one of the things that has characterized Dublin for decades, what we're doing here tonight and for this exercise is exactly what Dublin has done for those decades. And I'll just throw it out there as being forward thinking. You know, that's what's got us here today. That's made us a leader in the region, and if not the country in many aspects. We're doing exactly that now.
Right. I think that's a good point, Matt. I mean, I like 2035 is not a destination, right? It is just another step along the way in this community. So I appreciate that. And as I don't know if Lindsay's still on here or not, but as we talk about talking with the community, you know, it's not about sort of like closing Dublin out in 2035. It's just another mile marker on the way. Yes, Lindsay's here. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm still here, Jamie. Thanks.
Yeah. So good. So we're going to be talking soon, I hope, here about the public part of this process, but there's such rich content here about aspirations. I want to make sure we get it. So I see that we had somebody from the chat, but thanks, Matt, for that. So Brandon has dropped in some things in here. Fluid, effortless, exciting. I think that exciting and vibrancy number, vibrancy word shows up in a number of places for you. And it seems to be embedded in the 15-minute city and the mini cities and other things that you've talked about.
You know,
Thanks,
Jane, one of the things that Dublin is not afraid to change things, right?
Mhm.
It's just not afraid to say,
Mhm.
maybe we're not quite good enough, or we're not people centric enough, or we're not quite walkable enough, or it's not quite, you know, just this relentless pursuit of being even better for the people. There's something about that. We were finishing late last night, so hard to articulate it, but just this constant desire to just keep learning or keep growing, or just a relentless pursuit of being better. And that's what makes Dublin better.
I believe you, and I think that's hard, Kathy, because the general perception of, suburbs, particularly those that are relatively affluent, is that they like things just the way they are. The status quo is important, and let's hang on to that, So what Dublin is doing here is, I think, counter to that general, association of reputation. And you guys have a lot of evidence that that's not the case in Dublin. Like Bridge Street, Bridge Park, Innovation District. I mean, that's not necessarily you, but you guys have to work to overcome the reputation that so many others have about not wanting change. Any other thoughts? I appreciate the words in here. One of the words that I love when it comes to communities and managing them is this notion of nurturing. That you see that this is a place in the future where you can be nurtured if you're in Dublin. I mean, whatever that means. Sometimes people think that's a little bit too paternalistic, but I think it captures a lot of what I've heard you say in this work. And bold. Great.
Yeah, and Jamie, someone mentioned communal, and I love that word because that's what we're about. We help each other do, I mean, that's what Christine's programs are for. That's what a lot of the services that we provide are linking people to what they need. So I love that word. That sounds.
Yeah, the words tonight are a lot more colorful than last night. I don't know if that's because there were too many engineers in that group or what was going on, but these are great.
We have about 5 minutes left because we will end at 6 tonight.
Yes, I'm with you. So Kathy,
I'm not trying to rush you. I'm just trying to say please.
I was watching, and so I think in terms of what we wanted to do tonight was to, socialize, your ideas from meeting one, get some reflection about what you might want to elevate. You gave us good commentary about that and how you might connect to other ideas, threw in some different points of view, gave us some insight about the why and these sentiments here. So, I think this has been really helpful for tonight, and we are going to work at getting some public input with help from Lindsay. And we're also working to get some expert insight into what you're thinking right now and trying to do that before your June workshop. So thank you very much, Jane. I really appreciate it being with you again tonight. So I think I'm done with this part of the agenda.
Thank you. Homer, did you want to?
He actually just touched on it. I don't remember how much we talked about it last night, but we are in the process of starting to pull together a tool with CPI and with the advice from Jamie and Logan on getting some public input, for this as well. We really feel that we're at the stage where we're going to start soliciting some, big ideas from the general public, as well. So we should be in the next few weeks, getting something rolled out here, hopefully, and have some results back by that 21st of June, the council workshop. And I'm trying, if we can really kind of dedicate that council workshop mostly to this 2035 discussion, hopefully we'll have that, futuristic, speaker, have some results from the public, so we can kind of start, tying this thing together and grouping some things together and moving this thing a little bit, farther forward. But I just wanted to make sure that was talked about.
Hey, Homer, when you reach out to the public, and Lindsay too, is there a way? I loved what JM did on Bridge Park and had people put up dots. Is there a way that we can utilize, especially that little piece that Rodo gave us, maybe over at the rec center and at the corner of High and Bridge and over in Bridge Park, and maybe even out to a neighborhood in a park, something that they could either write on a board or put sticky notes, give us your big ideas. Let's go out. Can we go out into the community and ask questions and make it a fun kind of a creative like process that maybe on a Saturday afternoon, you don't have to call a meeting. People are out in the parks all the time. And although I don't want the staff to work on Saturday necessarily, but you know what I'm saying, get out there and maybe ask the questions in person. So just a thought.
And Jane, I was going to say this earlier, when you were talking in the previous conversation about how well the OSU students' responses were compared to other surveys, that was part of the success. They went out and basically spent their Saturdays soliciting conversation. So maybe that was successful in two ways, the platform and our efforts. So I think that's a must, honestly.
Right. And I would volunteer a Saturday afternoon to go out and stand on the street and ask questions. I'd be happy to do that.
Yes, you would. Yeah, I think we all would. Okay, thank you all very much. Very full meeting tonight. Thank you, Lindsay and Bruce and Homer, for all your work on our other items as well. I feel lots of forward motion and good progress. So thank you all. Anything else?
Yeah, Kathy, I have a question for you. Just in terms of process for what we covered tonight and when you report back to council on Monday, and I say that just because I will not be there Monday. So I think you'll want to make sure you let council know that they're going to get a survey about council resident engagement. Just let them know, because otherwise Lindsay's going to be like, hey, do this survey, and council's going to be like, what? The EDI training, I think because one of the questions that you're asking is to require this training. I think that I don't know if that's going to require a vote or not. So that might be something you need to talk to Chris about. But those are just the only two comments that I have.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was anticipating we would need a motion, and I don't think we're going to bring it this time. I think we're going to bring it at the following meeting, because I think we're a little close on that. As to Homer's point, I think he's going to do some updates. So I absolutely agree. I think we'll just get a little more background, and then I'll give a brief update saying we'll bring some things back as motions. I think might be just because of the timing of where we are now and the
Perfect. Okay, thank you for the clarification. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little too tight for that. Yeah.
Cool.
I think the one thing on that EDI training that I need to make a recommendation to you on, going forward, is also what the time frame is for requiring people to complete the training.
Yes.
There may be some different circumstances by when somebody's appointed versus when we approve this, to require it, that kind of stuff. But I'll have something in that memo for everybody to consider.
Great. And this is the first year, so we'll have some real, some runway to do that. So thank you. Yeah, thank you, Christine. We're trying hard to get this a little more, our mojo better about how to do these reports. So I appreciate that. Anything else? Thank you all. And the sun is going to shine for the next 3 days, so enjoy. Thank you all very much. Have a great
May the
evening.
fourth be with you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
All right.